Hey everybody, I'm Maggie, and we're on another episode of SRH Access Facebook Live. And today I'm here with sports medicine physician Dr. Shane Miller. Welcome.
Thank you.
We're excited to have you. We're here at our North Campus today, switching it up from our main campus. Today's all about concussions. I know it's a pretty hot topic because we're in fall, sports is starting up, school's starting up, and we want to remind you, live questions, we're taking them. So if you have something that you want Dr. Miller to answer, please put them in the comments below. So concussions, let's start with recognize and removal, because I know that's a big thing that's happening right now. Is what are the signs that parents, coaches, and players should know about taking a kid out of the game?
That's great. You know, as you mentioned, concussions are a hot topic, in the media, but we're seeing a lot. We're seeing hundreds of concussions a year just in our clinics here, to where this is a really big deal, and that means that there are millions of concussions occurring every year in the United States. And one of the biggest things that we're seeing, Maggie, is that kids and athletes have an injury and they may or may not be aware of it and may not know that they need to come out. And so we talk about two important concepts. Recognize. You need to know when a concussion has occurred, and remove, pulling them out of play. So the first step, recognition, is kind of hard sometimes. You know, I Friday and Saturday nights I was on the sidelines of a high school football game, and I'll be there again this weekend, 2 more games. And even as a doctor who sees concussions on a daily basis, sometimes it's hard. You know, something happens and plays happen all the time, so try and really pay attention. So if somebody's laying motionless on the ground or on the field, if they're slow to get up, if they seem dazed or stunned, if they seem a little bit wobbly and unsteady on their feet, maybe they're slow to respond and having a hard time answering questions, or they have sort of a sort of blank stare on their face. Those are some things. Sometimes they'll get up and grab their head. Any of these signs of a concussion, that if I see that, or if a parent or a coach sees that, that should be sort of a trigger to say, I might want to go and check that kid.
Right.
Sometimes we don't see that at all, and the kid may come over and complain of some symptoms, but you definitely want to take a look at those kids or those athletes and sort of pull them aside and evaluate a little further, start to get into some things. They may complain about headache. Headache is the most common symptom that we typically hear them, or pressure in their head. Maybe the light or noise sensitivity, the stadium lights, or it seems really loud to them. They may be dizzy. Sometimes they're nauseated, confused. Sometimes we'll notice they're real emotional. They may be irritable or upset more than normal. I hear that quite a bit from parents as well. But one of my big concerns is that we see often a kid will be evaluated, and then the coach and the athlete will sort of decide that they're okay, and then they get put back in.
Right.
And mom or dad will be telling us the next week, they didn't look right to me. I knew that they were okay, but I was up in the stands and they went back in. And so I think that as a parent, you got to protect your kid. And if you're concerned and you know something's not right, speak up and go and protect them. But also the coaches. So we say, when in doubt, sit them out and keep them out. So recognize a concussion, remove them from play.
So I know you were talking about these kind of visual signs that you see on these players. And is there, depending on the sport, what is the most common sport that you're seeing this? Is it just contact sports like football and soccer? Right. Or are you seeing it across the board?
Yes, we see them in all sports. So for the example the other night, color guard, flags. You don't think about it, but a pole hits you in the head. So I see probably 5 of those a year. And so it's not just football that we're thinking about, it's the cheerleaders on the sidelines. Soccer, especially girls soccer, is number 2 behind football. And so we really pay attention. But volleyball right now is going on. So you see pretty much every sport, we see the concussions in those. And so you always kind of have to keep your antenna up and pay attention to suspect that there might be a concussion. So
it sounds like, it's the responsibility of so many different people, the coaches, the parents, and even the players. And I think one of the big things, especially as kids are getting older and sports are getting more competitive, what are these players supposed to do when there's so much pressure to stay in the game and you're this star player? What are you supposed to do when your coach is like, you got to get out there?
Right, that's a very good point. I think that's one of the barriers and obstacles we face is that the athlete often knows that they're injured, but doesn't want to say anything because they don't want to come out. Right? They don't want to let their teammates down. They don't want to let the coach down. They want to be tough. Right. But this is a brain injury that we're dealing with. This is not an ankle or a knee to where it's something you can kind of tough through. But potentially there could be significant harm or a worse injury if you continue to play through these. And so one of the terms that we're using now is team up and speak up. And so as an athlete yourself, you have to have the courage, and really it's smart to speak up in protecting yourself. and say, hey, coach, something's not right. I'm not feeling well. Or if you're a teammate and you notice that one of your buddies or one of your teammates is not doing well or seems a little bit off or is telling you, hey, their head's hurting,
right, then
tell them to come out or go notify a coach. And I have that now. I think we're seeing that more, is that they'll say, yeah, my friend told the coach and they pulled me out. And so, because sometimes the athlete may not be aware. They may
right,
be truly injured and they're not aware. But that's a really big point here, is that the athletes have to speak up and talk to us. We have found that among our patients that we've seen here at Scottish Rite in the past couple of years, that 40% of them have continued to play after their injury, when we want that number to be 0%.
Definitely.
And so it means 4 out of 10 athletes right now here in North Texas are continuing to go back to play or continuing to play after their injury when they should be coming out. So you're right, we're not, even if we're recognizing things, they're not coming out. And not everybody is fortunate enough to have an athletic trainer on the sidelines at every game or every practice. If you are, that's great. Athletic trainers are very skilled in concussions as well as other sports-related injuries, but often it's a coach or a parent of the athletes themselves. And so efforts like these to educate the community so that they can hopefully learn why it's important to do these and learn what our recommendations are, so that they're not depending on a healthcare professional to pull them out of a game, that they need to pull themselves out.
So then if you're talking about if this incident happens and it's during game and there is an athletic trainer or it's a parent or a coach, maybe what is it when they come out, what are they testing for? Which they be, what is the test that's being happened to maybe find out if it is a concussion?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if there's a healthcare professional, some sort of a medical professional who has training in concussion management and evaluation and treatment, then that's great. You're in good hands. Let them do an evaluation. But if not, and the majority of the time at these smaller practices or club sports or youth sports, most of the time there's not necessarily a medical professional there that has that training. And so there is a tool available that came out, and it's an updated version. It's called the Concussion Recognition Tool. It's version 5. And I think it's a very helpful sort of pocket-sized card that's very great to have. And we'll post a link to that on our website so that people can have access to this. But it has the information, the things that you need to watch for. It has what are called red flags. So a red flag to us is sort of it's a stop sign. It says, hey, we're worried something may be worse than just a concussion here.
Right.
Maybe there's a brain bleed. Maybe there is something very bad that we need to get emergency attention on. And so it tells you what to watch for. Some of those things are repeated vomiting, a severe or worsening headache, having seizures, having numbness or tingling. These kinds of things make us think, okay, we may be worried about something more significant. Let's call 911, get an ambulance here, and get that child to a nearest emergency facility. Okay. And again, and it has other questions that we take them through. So for example, athletes should know where we are playing today. Which stadium are we at? Who are we playing? Who did we play last week? And so there's these questions, there's the Maddox questions that you ask them. What is the score, which quarter, those sorts of things. We're just trying to see if are they aware of their surroundings and what's going on. If we ask them what year it is or what day of the week or date, if it's in the middle of the summer, maybe these kids don't know that anyway, right? So we're asking things, but they should know what's going on in their sports world right now. And if they're not, then that may trigger us to say, hey, maybe we should suspect a concussion. And then it also has information about sort of what to do and how to respond, what kinds of things to do. But again, I usually say is if you're to that point where you're starting to ask those questions, you're worried enough that you should probably just go ahead and pull them out. It's better to miss one game than the whole season. Be safe. When in doubt, sit them out and keep them out. Because it's often that they look okay at the time, the adrenaline is going, they're in the middle of the game, they go back in, and then by the time you get home that night or the next day at school, now all of a sudden the symptoms have come about. That's very common with these concussions. And so if there's been a significant blow to the head and they seem like there's any symptoms or any concern or suspicion at all, just pull them out.
Right. So if this happens and the concussion happens, what is it, and they just have minor symptoms kind of at the beginning of it, could it be later on, like you were talking about the next day, that they could have even more severe symptoms? And then if they do, what should parents do?
Yes. So, and that's a very common scenario. Often as the injury kind of evolves, over minutes to hours to sometimes days, their symptoms will worsen. And so commonly they will be okay and not terrible at the time of the injury, and then over the next day or two they will worsen, but particularly as they try to exert themselves either physically or mentally, meaning they may be fine if they got hurt Saturday, Sunday, they're laying around the house not doing much, and then Monday they go back to school. Now all of a sudden the symptoms come out when they're at school. They may come to the school nurse and be complaining of a headache or these other symptoms that we've mentioned. So we do see that quite a bit. But I think anytime that there's a concern for a concussion, I would recommend that they're evaluated, again, by a medical professional who has experience evaluating concussions. And whether that's a sports concussion clinic like we have here at Scottish Rite, or whether that's their pediatrician or their athletic trainer at their school, somebody who is very comfortable and can make that decision about, is there something for us to be concerned? They can also give you guidance on getting them through school and getting them back into sports. When is it safe to go to school? What can they do at school? When is it safe to go back into sports? Is it safe when is it, to go back into these things, and what can they do, and how to manage some of those symptoms.
Yeah, so, and depending on the severity of it.
Absolutely.
Obviously.
Absolutely, because recovery is going to really vary from child to child and injury to injury, and there's a lot of things that we look at that help us manage the symptoms and help them feel better while they're trying to recover from these injuries, but really to protect the athlete from themselves and from others sometimes, their coaches, as you mentioned. And, but a lot of times the athlete wants to get back out there, and we have to make sure it's safe for them to do so.
Definitely. I think we actually just got a live question, so let me pull this up. Okay. Live question is, can anyone see a sports med doctor at Scottish Rite if needed after a concussion?
Yes, that's one of the things that we are excited about is that at Scottish Rite you can make an appointment, and we have increased our availability for patient appointments recently, and so if you do have an injury, especially a recent injury, then that is something that we would like to help you and be available to see.
Good information. So
not just concussions.
Yes, definitely.
Knees, ankles, shoulders, other things as well.
So thanks for that live question. Keep posting them. We want more. I think so. Going back to what we were talking about before that question is, the treatment of, if a athlete comes to you guys, either the concussion's already happened. So what is it that you guys are doing to try to help them heal them back to, their full?
Well, there are several things. The biggest and most important, I think, is a good, thorough initial evaluation. And that takes some time, right? When they're here, they're going to spend some time with us because we do a lot of testing, because we're trying to figure out, the brain is so incredibly complex, we're trying to find out what's working well and what's not. And things that are working well, we let them do their job. But things that are not working well, we may need to intervene and either let that part of the brain rest, or perhaps give it some exercises to help it kind of rehabilitate. And so we individualize the treatment based on how the patient is feeling at that time, and we will continue to change that as they evolve. And we're also involved and engaged in some research here, looking at various treatments, from medicines to other things that we're doing here. So we are very actively researching management and treatment of concussions here, along with our colleagues at UT Southwestern. We're part of the Context, which is the North Texas Concussion Registry. So we're doing a lot of collaborative research as well.
We have another live question. This one is all about what sports have the highest occurrence of concussions?
Well, certainly collision type sports. So we think about football, hockey, rugby, lacrosse, wrestling. Some of these sports where you are intentionally colliding with another person have the highest rates. But girls soccer particularly comes in right there, with that bunch. And it's unique because girls are a significant higher risk in every sport. So for example, girls soccer is higher than boys soccer. Girls basketball, higher than boys basketball. And there's a lot of different theories and thoughts on why that is, but I think it's something that we tend to forget, especially here in Texas. Everybody focuses on football, but we see it quite a bit. And so thinking about not just collision sports, but all sports, as you mentioned, and our girls, our girl athletes are just as high a risk as the boys are, and we need to, if not higher, and we really need to pay attention to that. And some of our data that we're presenting next week at the American Academy of Pediatrics annual meeting in Chicago, where we're going to be speaking to some of the differences we've seen among girls and boys in soccer and their response to concussions.
Wow, that's really great work, and it's exciting to know that we have that right here in the Metroplex. I think to kind of, I don't think we have any more live questions at this time, but if you have any more, post them, and we will make sure to answer them later on. We'll make sure Dr. Miller can get those. So to kind of wrap things up, I know you were talking about this Team Up, Speak Up
Yes.
I know that we're part of this campaign and it's kind of kicking off next week. So why don't you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Yes. If you haven't figured it out, I'm kind of passionate about concussions, and I would really like the community to do a better job of helping our children and our athletes know when they've had a concussion and come out of the game, because I think it's a very important thing to do. And so this concept of team up, speak up is again trying to get teammates to watch out for each other. And you know, if you see something, say something, right? So if something is not right with your teammate, team up and let's really be a team, because that's being a good teammate, is speaking up for them and recognizing, you know, even if they don't have a concussion, it's okay. We'll evaluate them. We can put them back in if they're not injured. But that's a good friend and that's a good teammate, is by speaking up when you're concerned at all about one of your teammates. And so there's going to be more to come on that next week.
It's a great message and great Facebook Live. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Such a hot topic, and you know, concussions. Just stay tuned, and we'll learn more next week about Team Up, Speak Up. Next week, SRH Access. Tune in next week. Thank you.
Thank you.